And now we have Ninetales, the evolved form of Vulpix, who is also capable of living for 1,000 years. This foxy Pokemon has been around since the beginning, from fiery origins throughout the ice-cold present. Yep, Ninetales has seen it all and had its name misspelled quite a number of times along the way. It probably wouldn't curse someone for doing that, but it's probably best not to give its vengeful side any reason to pop up. And yeah, apparently it can curse people. Are you sure this thing is only a fire Pokemon? Anyways, of course, this begs the question of if it's capable of turning these attributes into competitive success. So, how good was Ninetales actually? And in this video, we'll be covering these competitive formats. Ninetales has one of the gimmickiest of viable gimmicks in Red, Blue, and Yellow. Overall, it is not a good Pokemon, especially considering fire types are all considered bad, as they all noticeably share some pretty bad flaws, such as lack of notable resistances, mediocre bulk, bad weaknesses, and incapability of damaging the majority of the metagame. A good matchup against Exeggutor didn't mean much if it just got completely stuffed by Starmie, Alakazam, and Chansey. Plus, while Fire Blast may have had a 30% burn rate, burn also only deals 6% per turn, and thus is actually welcomed by the 3 Pokemon listed, as they much prefer it over Paralysis. However, Fire Spin's partial trapping effect can be deadly against slower teams, where they won't get to move barring a miss, and thus Ninetales abuses the existence of the sleep leads, like Jinx and Exeggutor, to potentially get its team off to a good start. Of course, it's still one Starmie/Alakazam away from being utterly useless, and it still massively struggles with Chansey unless it has great luck over a considerable number of turns. It also needs to get that lead matchup going for it, because otherwise it can't switch into anything safely. It's got its place among the gimmicks of RBY, but it's still a gimmick and not that great of one either. However, it's fine in underuse, so it's got that going for it at least. And on to Gen 2, the burn from Fire Blast is now down to 10%, and unfortunately Ninetales went from a decent 100 special to a paltry 81 special attack, whose impact is felt even less with leftovers everywhere. Also, the Fire Spin mechanics changed, and a whole host of excellent new Pokemon were introduced, and they just didn't care one way or the other about Ninetales. Honestly, it'd be shorter to write a list of Pokemon it is good against. And GSC Ninetales has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. It gained Hypnosis, but it's still not even good in underuse. And there's absolutely nothing to discuss here without making up fluff, so let's just go to the next gen. Yeah, sorry Ninetales. And while of course Ninetales never stood a chance in overuse with Sandstream, Tyranitar, Arena Trap, Dugtrio, Aerodactyl, Salamence, and Flygon appearing alongside old nemesis like Suicune and Blissey, it actually had some interesting tricks in underuse. On one of the most well-known teams in the metagame, it was a recipient of Calm Mind being baton passed to it to bolster its mediocre special attack. If its teammate Vileplume had set up Sunny Day, it'd be powered up even further, and thanks to its new ability Flash Fire, it could even absorb an opposing fire attack that was aimed at Vileplume to become even stronger. It could use Roar to rack up Spike's damage on its counters, and Quick Attack to foil the common Reversal and Flail Pokemon. And other than that, it could take on the supporting role with moves that recalled its shamanic and vengeful nature, such as Will-O-Wisp and Grudge. It was never too incredible, but quite a nice pick for underuse that showcased the metagame's diversity of viable strategy. Now on to Gen 4, all its old problems still existed, and new insurmountable ones came around by the names of Stealth Rock, Heatran, and Infernape. There was never a modicum of a sliver of hope for Ninetales in overuse. It did get some nice toys in the generational shift though, that it could use to carve out a nice role for itself in underuse. Nasty Plot is a dream for most special attackers, and it didn't even have to rely on hidden power to defeat water types, since it also gained a significantly stronger energy ball. Its nice special bulk also let it take a surf from the very common Milotic. While underused staples such as Chansey, Dugtrio, and Rain Dance teams got in its way, in addition to Arcanine and Houndoom providing fierce fire type competition, Ninetales' speed and setup capabilities, alongside the potentially crippling Hypnosis, gave it a nice role in the diverse underused metagame. Plus, it was also happy to come into Weezing's Will-O-Wisp to pick up a Flash Fire boost, and scaring out the amazing Venusaur was never bad. Unfortunately, it did eventually drop to never used, where it was still a fine outbait, unspectacular Pokemon. And on to the weather generation. Suddenly everything changed and Dream World gave Ninetales drought, and thus it shot up from the desolate depths of never use all the way up to becoming an overused staple, making its mark as part of the weather generation as one of the weather setters. It was easily the worst amongst its competition, so the lengths to which players went to try and make it useful on its own was a testament to the power of sun abuse. Tyranitar was an overused staple from the beginning, and Politoed's water typing and decent bulk/special attack meant it was more than usable, and both naturally destroyed Ninetales one-on-one. Both of them were prime switch-ins against Ninetales to immediately reset the weather so they couldn't effectively use Solar Beam. So Sun teams were always built with a lot more care, since Ninetales was not the mostly self-sufficient Pokemon the others were. The Magic Bounce Pokemon Espeon and Xatu were used in conjunction with Dugtrio to forcefully destroy the common stealth-rocking Tyranitar so that Ninetales' Sun would be permanent. Spinners such as Fortress and Donphan were also commonplace. Indeed, this support was far more than what Rain and Sand generally used because of Ninetales' frailty and general inability to make things happen, unlike even Politoed, who wielded quite a fierce choice spec set. However, the sheer power of Chlorophyll users, mainly Venusaur but also Victreebel, Lilligant, and Sawsbuck, made it worth it, in addition to the insane power of Volcarona. These Pokemon also appreciated the ever-common Heatran being trapped by Dugtrio, and Volcarona enjoyed the anti-Stealth Rock support, so their sweep was well supported, and Sun made its way into the spotlight of overuse. Ninetales always used Will-O-Wisp, as it was necessary to not give Politoed and Tyranitar completely free entry. Other common moves included Protect, which was used to rack up burn, recover leftovers, and potentially scout moves, Flamethrower for necessary stab, and Roar to prevent it from being setup fodder for the variety of terrifying Pokemon in the tier. Hidden Power Fire was also useful to break Heatran's balloon and get some damage on Tyranitar, however minimal. Sunny Day was even used to turn the tables on a Tyranitar or Politoed switching in. Sometimes it even also used funky tricks such as Disable, Substitute, or Pain Split, but its overall role was the same. Bulk it out so it could kind of switch into Politoed, give it speed to threaten burn on as many Pokemon as possible since its 100 speed was actually quite good, and exert caution. Sun offense was of course what everyone thought about when imagining Sun, but Sun Stall was actually quite effective, utilizing the talents of Cresselia and its 75% healing Moonlight in an environment where Tyranitar was thwarted at every corner, and Hidden Power Fire was boosted, as well as Venusaur's Subseed variants being just as scary as the growth ones, and others such as Bulky Volcarona, Chansey Fortress, Jellicent, and Sableye, alongside Dugtrio of course. They were a fine choice in the metagame and rose to quite some prominence, although not to the mainstream level of offense, which was much more straightforward and simplistic in its easy to use style. While Ninetales was never a standout performer itself, it was enough to make Sun into an amazing metagame force, and Ninetales of course had to be involved in every battle for that to happen. It didn't sweep any teams, but it certainly managed to support its team as much as possible, despite the complaints of many about how useless it was. Sun teams won many tournaments over the years, and to the surprise of many, eventually Chlorophyll sweepers were deemed so powerful that they were banned alongside Drought. While everyone thought Sun would then fade into obscurity, the powerful Cresselia was too much, and eventually it was realized that Dugtrio was the culprit behind the excessive powerful functioning of these teams. Throughout the generation, wherever there was Ninetales, there was almost always Dugtrio. However, Tails itself was overall fine, spreading its damage and baiting the proper targets so that its users could make the right moves to win the game with the right sweeper. Finally, a generation of legitimate overuse glory for our nine-tailed friend. And in VGC Gen 5 in 2012, Drought Ninetales wasn't available, but in 2013 it made its appearance on the big stage. With Cresselia and Heatran already being metagame staples, Ninetales elevated them to nosebleed heights, despite the weather wars it had to fight, which is ultimately what kept it out of the true upper echelon of the metagame. But it certainly had its place. Ninetales does this of course by using Drought to power up their moves, as well as potentially canceling out other weathers like Sand and Rain. Ninetales was most notably used by Leos Kowaluski, who used it to reach top 8 at the German Nationals, and at the US Nationals, Richard Ashby reached 9th, Jun Temmening reached 14th, and Jeff Hamilton reached 17th. And on to Gen 6, automatic weather is no longer permanent, and so along with that also goes Ninetales. Not to mention that Mega Charizard Y is now a thing and also had Drought, so people just preferred to use Zard Y, and it dropped all the way to Never Use, where it was viable. Well, barely. And after that it dropped even further to PU, where it actually ended up being pretty good with its nasty plot tricks. However, it was nothing to write home about. Generation 6 was unfortunately completely forgettable for a foxy friend. And for VGC, with the existence of Mega Charizard Y, Ninetales was completely outclassed as a Sun user, even though it didn't take up the Mega slot. In 2015, Stephen Brown III made use of a Choice Scarf variant to spam Heat Wave and have his accompanying Shift Tree have a fast first turn fake out right from the start, instead of waiting for Charizard to Mega Evolve and thus getting outrun by Mega Kangaskhan. This also allowed him to use Salamis as his Mega evolution. He went on to place 17th at the Athens Regionals. Akifumi Yoshihara also used Ninetales plus Salamence at Worlds of all places. While both of these players' creativity is applauded, the number of top placements from Zard Y speaks volumes to who the better drought user was. On to Sun and Moon, there was no change in the PU status of the original Ninetales. However, it was a new story for its new form, the gorgeous Ice Fairy Alolan Ninetales with Snow Warning and improved speed, shooting up to an excellent base 109, thus escaping the common dreaded base 100 tie and giving it a jump on many significant Pokemon, such as Garchomp and Keldeo. It had some new tools to go with its new look and typing, the most prominent and important of which was Aurora Veil, the quote-unquote super screen, combining both light screen and reflect into one move, but only usable under hail. It also had many great supporting options like Safeguard to protect against toxic spikes, Encore to potentially create an even easier setup, and Hypnosis was self-explanatory. While it didn't take off at the beginning of the generation, eventually people realized that in a single turn, they could create incredibly tough conditions for a plethora of ridiculous hard-to-stop sweepers, which resulted in absolutely brutal hyper-offense teams. Zygarde and Magearna were tough enough to deal with already without getting instant double screens. For a while, these teams were commonplace in the metagame, but they were unfortunately fizzled out. Pokemon such as Swords Dance Mega Scizor could set up alongside Ninetales and cleave through them pretty hard, and Mega Charizard Y and Tyranitar, who is also sometimes Mega, could change the weather and ruin any attempt at Aurora Veil. So would Pelipper, but at least Ninetales could destroy it with Freeze Dry. With Ultra Sun and Moon gifting a ton of new Pokemon Defog, that was the nail in the coffin for the Aurora Veil hyper offense era of overuse, giving way to Tapu Koko's dual screens variants. And in 2017, Alolan Ninetales was another Alolan the competitive community was very interested in, and it shows because Alolan Ninetales was on a lot of teams. It can outspeed and one-hit KO Garchomp with the spread move Blizzard, while also supporting the team with Aurora Veil, nailing waters like Tapu Fini with Freeze Dry, controlling speed with Icy Wind, and spreading chip damage with Snow Warning. Though its hail can be interrupted by other weather Pokemon, thus stopping Aurora Veil, it is still pretty useful versus rain teams because of Freeze Dry, which lets it do a lot of damage versus common rain Pokemon like Gastrodon and of course Pelipper. Its Ice and Fairy type is good offensively, but it also makes it very scared of steel types, especially Metagross, Kartana, and Celesteela. It also does not like fire types, such as Alolan Marowak, and especially Drought Torkoal, who stops Aurora Veil on switch-in, and Ninetales cannot hit these fire types back for a lot of damage. However, despite these weaknesses, it was a fine choice for the VGC 2017 metagame, as it supported its teams very well, and there were teammates like Arcanine who could cover most of its weaknesses. Being such a fine choice, there were a lot of people who used it, and it would take us a year to name all of them. But first placers at various big tournaments include Aaron Cybertron Zhang at the Melbourne Challenge, Flavio Delpedio at the Sao Paulo Challenge, Martin Gajdos at the Toronto Regionals, and Javier Pereda at the Chile Regionals. At Worlds, Ninetales was featured on runner-up Sam Tandelis' team, aka Zelda. Fun fact, Aurora Veil was so powerful that the champion of 2017 Worlds used Brick Break on Marowak just to get rid of it. And in 2018, the expanded Pokedex shot Ninetales back to obscurity. Mega Charizard Y was back, and its drought blocked Aurora Veil. Not to mention the rest of the weather setters were also back, and steel types such as Mega Metagross outsped and destroyed it. Heran also made a return, who has an extremely good matchup versus it. With all these things getting in the way, Alolan Ninetales unfortunately fell off the map in terms of usage. And that's it. So how good was Ninetales actually? The answer is not very good at all. In fact, for most of its life, straight up bad. Its moment of glory came in Black and White, where the strategies it enabled ended up being too powerful. And for that generation at least, while it was never a star itself, it was a key part of that. In Sun and Moon singles, its Alolan form had its 15 minutes, but that passed as well. And as for VGC, it had a year of excellence in 2017, but it wasn't meant to last, as it couldn't keep up with the new additions the following year. Overall, Ninetales was unfortunately the definition of a forgettable Pokemon, competitively speaking anyway. So we'll just have to remember the few times it did make a splash in the big time, though I'm probably gonna get cursed for this video. Thanks for watching everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and of course, as always, comment on what Pokemon you want to see next. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms, yada yada yada. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.